On 1 July 2007, at the stroke of midnight, 50,000 British pubs changed forever. Not gradually, not over a generation, overnight. The smoking ban came into force across England, and with it, something that had no name at the time, but that every person who drank in a pub before that summer understood instinctively. A way of life that had been building since the Victorian era simply stopped. If you remember the British pub before that night, you remember a different country. This is file number 07 of the Forgotten Britain archive. There were 57,500 pubs in Britain in 2007. By the end of that decade, the number had fallen below 50,000. By the early 2010s, 1,000 were closing every year. Some blamed the recession. Some blamed supermarket alcohol. Some blamed the landlords. But the people who actually lived it, the regulars, the barmaids, the darts, secretaries, the domino clubs, they will tell you the same thing. It ended on 1 July 2007. Everything after was just the body cooling. What follows are 15 rituals that vanished with it, not customs that faded over decades. Rituals that existed on the 30th of June and were gone by the 1st of July. If you lived them, you will recognize every single one. The second ritual on this list is where most people start. But we begin instead with something quieter. The ashtray run. Every pub in Britain had a designated member of staff, sometimes a young lad on his first job, sometimes a landlady who'd been doing it 30 years, whose unofficial role included clearing ashtrays before they reached critical mass. Not after every cigarette. There was a skill to the timing. You'd watch the table, read the rhythm of the conversation, and move in during a lull. A clean ashtray on a pub table in 1994 was the equivalent of topped-up bread in a good restaurant. It was hospitality. It was invisible when done right, and deeply noticed when it wasn't. The last ashtray run in England happened on the night of 30 June 2007. No one announced it. No one marked it. It simply never happened again. And the one that hit hardest, the ritual that underpinned every single other one on this list, was the smoking break as social architecture. Because in the pre-2007 British pub, you did not go outside to smoke. You smoked where you sat. And that meant the table was the unit of social life. The conversation was continuous. The round stayed intact. Nobody disappeared for 7 minutes every 45. The smoking ban did not simply push smokers outside. It fractured the table. It introduced interruption as a structural feature of a pub evening. The group that arrived together stopped leaving together, something that had no obvious name. The unbroken session quietly died, and the pub has never fully recovered its grammar since. If you drank in a pub before that summer, you will remember what the ceiling looked like. Not every pub, but most. A particular amber-brown stain on the Artex, concentrated above the regulars' corner, fading toward the saloon door. It was not decorative. It was accumulation years of embassy. Number 6 and Lambert and Butler rising and settling. Brewery refits from the mid-1990s onward tried to paint over it, but the stain came back within 18 months because the source was still there. After July 2007, the refits finally held. The ceilings went white and stayed white. In dozens of Weatherspoons and Harvester conversions across the Midlands and the North, those ceilings were stripped and replastered in the years that followed. The amber record of 50 years of working-class leisure was emulsioned over in Magnolia. It is gone from every pub in England. There was a moment, specific and repeatable, that anyone who grew up in a pub-going family will recognise. Walking in from the cold February, November, any grey month, and hitting the wall of warmth. It was not just central heating. It was breath and smoke and beer, and the particular heat that a room generates when 40 people have been in it for 3 hours. It had a weight to it, a physical resistance. Children dragged along on a Sunday lunchtime felt it before they saw anything. It was the first signal that you had arrived somewhere. That specific sensory threshold, that wall, no longer exists in any pub in Britain. There was a class of object that disappeared so completely that most people under 40 have never seen one in situ. The pub cigarette machine, not the vending machine in a corner, the proper one, bolted to the wall beside the fruit machine, offering 10 brands in a chrome and perspex panel with a pull knob mechanism. In the mid-1980s, there were an estimated 120,000 of them across licensed premises in the United Kingdom. They were serviced by a network of specialist engineers, many of them self-employed men with a van route that covered 30 or 40 pubs across a county. The machines went first when the ban hit, not immediately, but within 2 years, as takings collapsed. The engineers' routes disappeared with them. Another small trade, unmapped, unrecorded, quietly killed. The pub collection tin had a specific ritual attached to it that has been almost entirely forgotten. Not just the tin on the bar, though, that too is rarer now, but the way a retiring regular, a man who had drunk in the same pub for 30 or 40 years, would have a whip round organised in his honour on his last working Friday. Someone would pass a pint glass around the bar, not a tin, a glass, so everyone could see what was in it. The landlord would match the first £5. The retiree would be presented with the glass and told to count it himself, loudly, in front of the bar. This happened in working men's clubs from Sunderland to Swansea every Friday in the 1970s and 1980s. It required a full bar. After 2007, the full bar became rarer. The ritual lost its conditions and died with them. The knife board game is not one that gets discussed in any retrospective of pub culture, and that absence is itself worth noting. Before the standardization of steel dartboards and the rise of sponsored arrows, many northern pubs kept a knife board, a horizontal wooden ledge above the bar, on which bladed penknives belonging to regulars were stored between visits. A man would hand his knife to the barman at the end of a session. It would go on the board with his name in marker on a piece of sticking plaster. He would collect it next time. The practice was already dying by the 1990s, killed first by insurance liability, then by licensing conditions. By 2007, perhaps a handful of pubs still had one. The smoking ban did not kill the knife board, but the same cultural clearing that swept through pub interiors after 2007, the refits, the rebrandings, the new management companies removed the last of them. If you ever saw one, you are carrying a memory that no photograph has properly documented. The pub quiz, as it exists today, is not the pub quiz of 1995. The modern version runs on printed answer sheets, digital scoreboards, and microphone stands. The version that existed in every working-class pub from roughly 1978 onward was something quieter and more particular. A quizmaster, usually a regular, never paid. Sometimes the landlord's brother-in-law would stand at the bar with a sheet of foolscap paper and read questions in a voice loud enough to carry to the back table, but not so loud as to disturb the dominoes. Teams were 3 to 6 people. Entry was 50 pence per head. The prize was a round of drinks, chosen by the winning team. There were no buzzers. There was no PA system. If you shouted your answer out, you were disqualified. After 2007, the pub quiz survived, but the version that survives is a branded, amplified, ticketed event. The informal one, run by someone who did it for the love of it and knew when not to read the next question until the silk cut had been finished, is gone. There was a specific hour of the Sunday lunchtime session, roughly between 12:30 and 1:30, when the British pub operated at a particular pitch that has no modern equivalent. The roast was on somewhere nearby. Families were eating at home, but the pub was full of men who would be home by 2, not drunk, not sober. Somewhere in the middle of a very specific and understood Sunday afternoon, intoxication that had its own name in different regions, nicely oiled in Yorkshire, merry in the Welsh valleys, getting there, in most of the Midlands. The children who accompanied fathers to the pub car park at this hour and were given a packet of crisps and a bottle of Tizer through the car window are now in their 50s and 60s. That specific transaction, the car park handover, the crisps, the bottle opener kept in the glove box, was already vanishing before 2007. The ban sealed it. The pub telephone, before the mobile era, was a ritual in itself. Not the payphone in the corridor, that was a different thing entirely. The phone behind the bar, a black or cream rotary model, switched to the landlord's number, which was listed in the local directory. From the mid-1960s onward, wives across Britain would call the pub at 10 to 11 to speak to a husband who was not, technically, supposed to be there. The barman had a system. He would hold the handset in the air and say the name. If the man wanted to take the call, he came. If he didn't, He gave the barman a look, and the barman said, "Not here tonight, love." This was not deception. It was a social protocol understood by all parties, including the wife. It required a specific kind of barman, one who could read the room, and it required a pub that was intimate enough to work in. The phone still exists in a few pubs. The ritual it served does not. Closing time. Before the Licensing Act 2003 began to be implemented across England, was not just a legal threshold, it was a theatrical event. The bell, then the shout, "Last orders, please, ladies and gentlemen," which in most pubs was neither a request nor a warning, but a performance, delivered with the same phrasing every night for decades, by the same person, in the same tone. What happened in the 15 minutes after the bell was its own subculture. The speed round. Every experienced drinker knew how to order a final pint at exactly the right moment, not too early, which wasted drinking time, not too late, which left you with a half that had to be finished standing with your coat already on. The skill of the speed round was specific and practiced. Extended licensing hours after 2005 dissolved it. The bell remained in some pubs, but the ritual it anchored, the shared, simultaneous, national last orders moment, is gone. The snug, not the concept of it, which architects have been trying to revive in various forms since the 1990s. The actual snugger room of no more than 12 feet by 10, separated from the main bar by a partition with a hatch, accessed by a narrow door that required you to turn sideways if you were carrying 2 pints, found in terraced pubs from Liverpool to Leeds, from Gateshead to Gloucester. The snug was where women drank before it was acceptable to drink in the main bar. Then it became where the older regulars went when the main bar got too loud. Then it became where certain conversations happened that did not need witnesses. The smoking ban accelerated the closure of snugs not by making them illegal, but by making them economically unviable. A room of 6 people smoking was a room of 12 square meters that needed ventilation it couldn't have, in a space too small to pay for. Breweries closed them and opened up the partition into open-plan space. The snug is now an architectural memory in most British towns. The final ritual, and the one that keeps appearing in comment sections and letters pages whenever the pre-2007 pub is discussed, is the one that requires the least explanation and resists it most. The particular silence at the bar between rounds, not an uncomfortable silence. The opposite of uncomfortable. The silence of 2 men who had been drinking together for 20 years and had nothing left to prove to each other, standing side by side, watching the barman pour, not speaking because everything that needed saying had already been said tonight and most other nights. That silence was built on continuity. It required knowing the person next to you well enough to not need to fill the space. It required a pub that stayed the same long enough for that continuity to accumulate. The churn of pub culture after 2007, the closures, the rebrandings, the new management, the gastropub conversions broke the continuity. You cannot have the silence if you keep losing the room. 50,000 pubs on the 1st of July 2007. A culture that had been forming since the Beerhouse Act of 1,830–177 years of uninterrupted social architecture, and on a single summer morning, it entered a phase from which it has not recovered. The 15 rituals described in this file did not all die on that exact date. Some were already weakened. Some had been fading since the 1980s. But the ban was the pivot point. It changed the physical conditions of the pub so completely that the practices which depended on those conditions could no longer survive. The pub that exists today is not a diminished version of the one that existed before. It is a different institution operating under the same name. If you remember any of this, if you stood at one of those bars, or pulled a pint behind one, or collected ashtrays before the rush, or counted coins out of a collection glass, leave a note below. Every memory is part of the archive. The record is incomplete without yours. This was file number 07. There are 99 more in the archive. Subscribe and turn the page with us.